Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. You're watching the Rustic Wednesday, but on Saturday collaboration, Christmas Winter Edition, hosted by my two good friends, Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling and Shelly of Repurposed My Way. You'll find links to their channels as well as a link to the playlist, which is full of extremely talented creators, in the description box. Please be sure to check them out and show them some love. We have some really cool projects to make today, including a vintage baby shoe made from clay. So, let's get into it. For this project, all we're really going to need is some Model Magic air dry clay, this pattern for a vintage style baby shoe that I found on Pinterest. So I'm going to link the pin in the description box for you so you can check it out. I printed mine on a piece of cardstock and cut out all the pieces. We're also going to need half of a 2.3 inch foam ball. I'm using one of the smooth foam balls. You can use whatever you have on hand. We're going to grab a big old handful of clay and stretch it and knead it to condition it. Then we're going to roll it out. We want it to be wide enough to accommodate the pattern pieces that we're going to cut out. I've laid one of my pattern pieces on the clay. I'm going to use an X-Acto knife to trace around the pattern, cutting it from the clay. I believe this pattern is for a felt doll show, if I'm not mistaken, but like I said, I'm going to link the pin so you can check it out on Pinterest. I also want to let you know that there are little pointy parts on the pattern. You're going to want to cut these out. They're going to help you align the pattern pieces. Once I've cut my piece, I'm going to move it off to the side and cover it with a very lightly damp paper towel to prevent my clay from drying out as I'm cutting out the other pieces. There are 4 pieces to the pattern in total: the sole, the toe, the back, and the tongue. I've always loved the look of a vintage baby shoe for decor, and I can never find them out in the wild, so I figured, you know what, let's make our own. All of our pieces are cut from the clay, and now we're going to assemble. We're going to start with the sole. There's a point here at the back of the shoe and one at the front. I've placed it down in front of me, the toe of the sole facing me. I'll take my foam ball half and place it at the front of the sole, at the toe of the shoe. This is going to add structure to our shoe. Now we're going to take our toe piece and we're going to line up the point on the toe piece with the point on the sole. And we're just going to wrap the clay around the foam ball, aligning the bottom edge with the edge of the sole. I'll make adjustments as necessary, tapping the edge so that it sticks to the edge of the sole. So you're just kind of pushing it in there. Now we'll add the back piece, once again aligning the point in the center of the back piece with the point on the back of the sole. I wrap the clay around the edge of the shoe, bringing the side flaps toward the front. Here's a look at how it should line up on the sides. And we're going to shape the opening of the shoe by pushing the clay slightly inward. And I'm just going to fuss around with it until I'm comfortable with the shape. I add the tongue just inside the center of the toe section. It's going to rest on the foam ball. And I'm going to lightly press the clay so that the tongue is in contact with the sides as well as with that toe piece across the front. See, I'm just gently pushing. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to come along the bottom edge here and pinch close any openings there might be in the clay. The good thing about this is that it's supposed to be a vintage baby shoe, so if it's a little wonky, we can live with that. I'm going to go completely around the bottom of the shoe, making sure that everything is in contact, and then I'm going to fuss with it a little bit again, to shape it until I'm happy with it. I wad up a paper towel into a ball, and I'm going to push it into the opening of the shoe so that it holds its shape while we work on it further. Using my pointy clay tool here to smooth out some of the rougher parts of the clay along the edge. The cuts were pretty smooth, so they're not too bad. So I'm just, anything that's sticking up, pushing it into place. Now I'm going to use one of my ball tools to make the impressions of the shoelace holes. I'm not going to actually poke holes because I really don't think that the clay will lend itself to threading laces through the holes. I could be wrong, but I don't want to take the chance. Anyway, I'm going to do 4 impressions of holes down each side of the shoe, and I'm just eyeballing this. With my pointy tool once more, I'm going to make impressions of stitches right along the outside of the holes, across the top of the toe, right here, and just following the shape along the side. Now we're going to set that aside to dry overnight. And while I have the clay on the go, I'm going to cut 2 circles from the clay using my fondant cutter. I want to make some faux enamel tags. I've got some red ink here and a stamp of the number 25, which will push right into the center of both of the clay circles. We will be using at least one of these in our projects. Right, so I wound up leaving my baby shoe sit for a full 24 hours. It needed that extra time to be well dried. Anyway, I'm going to give this bear 2 coats of Americana light cocoa. It's kind of like a vintage white, buttercreamy color. I'm actually really pleased with the shape of this. I think it turned out pretty good, didn't it? Looks like a legit baby shoe. I want this to look like it's been sitting around in some attic somewhere for years. So I'm going to mix up a wash using Folk Art floating medium and some Americana plain old cocoa. This should give us a nice sepia tone. I'm going to load my brush first with the floating medium, and then I'm going to pull some of the paint out of the puddle, mix it there on the plate. I want it to be translucent. We want this to wash on, like a stain, and wipe it back with a paper towel until I'm happy with the depth of color. I am doing this in sections here because I don't want to leave any fingerprints in the stain. You feel me? I coat the entire shoe, including the inside, with the wash. Now that the wash has dried, to add even more distressing, I'm going to use my Tim Holtz Vintage Photograph ink, and I'm going to apply it around the bottom of the shoe with a cosmetic sponge. I'll add it to various areas so that the stain looks authentic, where it would catch in a shoe, so on all the lifted edges. Now a baby shoe would be scuffed right here at the toe, so I'm going to very lightly dab around the toe with some black ink. This is very, very light, very faded looking. I want it to look like a realistic scuff mark. I'm also going to add a little around the ankle too. With the same ball tool that I used to create the lace holes, I'll dip the tool into the cocoa paint and dot right over the holes. This is going to give them some depth and age. And that's it for painting this show. I pounce on some DecoArt multi-purpose sealer with a cosmetic sponge to give it a nice finished look and to protect it. All we need to do now is Christmas it up by adding some doodads. I have a couple of homespun fabric strips, and I've laced a wood ball onto them to create a wee lasso that we're going to slip right over the top of the shoe. These are a little long, so I'm just going to trim them to size. I have here a holly peck and some of this vintage looking beautiful lace that Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling sent me last year. I'm going to wrap that around the bottom of the peck to make a kind of border there. We want that lace to show. And then we're going to pop that right into the center of our shoe. Let's add a pine cone right here in the front of the shoe. Just going to tuck it in right there next to the holly. That pine cone matches the bead nicely. They tie in really well together. I have this little spiny piece of pine. I think it came off of a Dollar Tree ornament. I bent it in half and I'm going to tuck it in alongside the holly on the opposite side. Last but not least, remember those little faux enamel medallions we made that had the 25 on them? I edged them with some red paint and then I added some faux rust and sealed them with gloss Mod Podge. I'm going to tuck that right into the very front for a final touch. For our second project, we're going to use one of these standard Dollar Tree wood boxes with the star cutouts on this side to make a rustic Christmas tree lot diorama. I'll paint the inside bottom of the box white, and the rest of it will get 2 coats of Americana cherry red. I went through my Pinterest boards that had vintage Christmas scenes, and I created a little backdrop scene. I printed this on standard printer paper and sprayed it with clear matte sealer because I have an inkjet printer, and if you use Mod Podge on the image without sealing it, it will smear the ink. I also created some text and printed out a few other images onto some cardstock that we're going to use in our diorama / assemblage. And we're going to cut everything out. After I had cut everything out, I realized a couple of the pieces that I printed on the cardstock are going to need some extra support, so I'm going to glue them onto another piece of cardstock and then cut them out again. Once everything has been cut and reinforced, I'm going to take my vintage photograph ink and lightly go around the edges of the graphics, the text parts. I'm not going to bother with the little kids that I cut out because they're already really dark and I really don't want to make them disappear by adding additional ink. You feel me? I decided to ink the edge of the background street scene also. Of course I want to add some glitter, so I'm just going to use some Mod Podge and a small paintbrush and add some glamour dust to different areas of the background scene to make it look like the snow is glistening. I'm going to add some peridot green glitter to the trees that the children are holding. I love this glitter. It's so pretty. I'm not going to coat the entire tree. I'm just going to, highlight it more or less. I'll add some red glitter dots to the text graphics. I'm also going to trim the little circular graphics with some of the red glitter as well. Grabbing a couple of these mini cupcake liners to use as backers for the circular graphics. And we're going to trim the edges of those in red glitter also. But first, we're going to glue 2 of them together. So we're just going to open them up nice and flat and glue the white sides together so that the metallics are showing. And I'm using an Elmer's glue stick to adhere the cupcake liners to one another. This is going to give us a little extra support, and it's going to look pretty from the back as well as from the front. And now we can trim the edges with some red glitter too. Now that everything is glittered, I'm going to glue the graphic into the center of the cupcake liners, and I'm just going to do this with hot glue. Now we can start assembling. I'll apply a layer of Mod Podge to the bottom of our box, and we're going to drop our street scene in there. Make sure that it's well adhered by applying pressure with our fingers, burnishing it into place. Once that's well stuck down, we're going to pounce on a top coat of the Mod Podge also. This is going to seal the glitter in place and keep it from shedding. Next, I'm going to pull out my Jo Sonja Fruitwood Gel Stain and stain the outside of the box and the inner sides of the box. I'm not going to do anything to the street scene. This will be very subtle, but it's going to add a little bit of age and a little bit of a sepia tone. You know what I'm saying? So we're just going to brush it on and wipe it back with a paper towel. For an additional 3D element, I have a couple of bottle brush Christmas trees that we're going to glue into the corner right here. The green tree seems to be a little too puffy for this space, so I'm going to trim it down a wee bit. I'm also going to remove the stand from the smaller tree just by unscrewing it. And I'm going to use a good amount of hot glue here to attach the trees. Let's position our kids. I've cut a wee nub of a glue stick, which I'm going to glue into place, and then I'm going to glue the little boy holding the tree on top of that little nub. This will give us a nice 3D effect. Before we add the brother and sister, I'm going to add some snow text to fill in along the bottom around the trees, across the bottom of the box, so that it looks like a snowy sidewalk. And of course, we're going to sprinkle with glamour dust to make the snow glisten. I glued a mini wood spool to that wood base that we took off the smaller tree, and we're going to use that to elevate the brother and sister. So I'm going to glue them into place, again with hot glue. I did wind up going in and covering the spool with some of the snow text. I've placed my Christmas tree graphic on top of some parchment paper, and I will outline the top of it with some hot glue, making it look like icicles dripping down. And then we're going to sprinkle that with a little glamour dust as well. This piece is going to span the bottom of the box, and I did add little tabs on the side and painted them red to match the box. The pine, fir, and spruce sign is going to get the same treatment with the glue and the glitter. This is going to be at the very top of the box. I want some big old icicles dripping down from the top of the box, so to accomplish that, I took my hot glue gun and used it to draw icicles onto the piece of parchment paper. I'm going to sprinkle that with some glamour dust as well. Now I've already made some, but I wanted to show you the process. It's really easy. You just have to give the glue a couple of minutes to dry, and then you can peel it right up off the parchment paper. See? Now I can affix my Christmas tree sign to the bottom of the box, and I'm going to wrap those tabs around the side. That's why I painted them red, because I knew we were going to see them. I run a line of hot glue across the top edge of the box, and I'll apply the pine, fir, spruce sign right there from end to end. Now that that's done, we can glue our hot glue icicles along the edge, and it's going to wrap around the sides of the box. Again, I'm going to use hot glue to attach the icicles. And finally, we're going to flank the sign with those cupcake liner medallions. For my last project, I'm going to use the flip side of my carnival marquee sign. Remember this? So I'm going to give the surface 2 coats of white paint as the base color. We're going to be doing a reverse stencil here. I jumped into Silhouette Design Studio and designed a graphic that says Sleigh Rides, and I cut it out just from some cheapy Dollar Tree vinyl. I taped off some stripes top and bottom there, and I'm going to burnish my vinyl into place. I'll flank the lettering with some stripes as well, so I'm just gonna burnish these 3 little guys here on this end, and I'll do it on the opposite end of the sign as well. I love this look. And finally, we'll get our lettering into place. I love the cleanness and crispness of this font. It's called Market Deco. Love it. I'm going to use some of my Mod Podge to pounce along the edges of the vinyl lettering and the lines. This will prevent the top coat from bleeding under the vinyl. We're going to use that cherry red again as the top coat. And I actually had to give this 4 coats because the red isn't terribly opaque, so 4 coats was almost perfect. Now for my favorite part, removing the vinyl. Ooh. Look how crisp those letters are. Just perfect. And the lines, yay, nice and crisp. So as this is a rustic piece, we're going to lightly sand distress this, focusing mostly on the edges and the corners. I will go very gently over the letters, but they're so nice and crisp, I don't want to jack them up too much. I just want a little bit of wear on them. You know what I'm saying? After I wipe away the dust, I'll use my Jo Sonja Fruitwood stain to add some aging. I'm going to let the stain dry, and then I'll give it a coat of clear matte sealer spray. Once that's dry, we'll pop the lights in, and we're done. Let's take a final look at today's projects. When you can't find a vintage baby shoe, you make your own. All you need is a little bit of clay. I love the way this turned out. I think it looks like a legit baby show. You let me know what you think. I think just tucking the odd piece to represent the season into the opening is perfect because I'll be able to restyle this show throughout the year. And I do love that little faux enamel tag. And now for our Christmas tree lot diorama. I absolutely love putting little scenes together like this. Well, you guys know I love assemblages and dioramas. I don't know, I just think they're adorable. The banner and the sign that goes across the top and bottom of the box, those I designed in Photoshop. And you can see here, I just placed more bottle brush trees on the very top. I love it. Let me know what you think. And finally, our light up marquee Sleigh Ride sign. I mean, this project was halfway done. I already had the holes cut in it for the lighting, so it was so worth it to just paint the flip side. So that's it for today. I hope you liked my rustic projects. I really enjoyed making these. Please let me know what you think, and please be sure to check out both Dawn and Shelly's channels. Channels will be listed in the description box along with the playlist. Please go watch everybody's videos. Everybody's so talented and has great ideas. You won't want to miss them. So head on over there and show them some love. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.